And so my handle at that time when I was younger was I called myself California Flash. And when people said, well, why do they call you Flash? Because when I'd go by them, it was a flash. And I would do it in this thing because it had tall gears, about as fast as I've had this car.
Welcome to Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. On this week's episode of Sam's Garage, the long-awaited axles for Kevin's Jeep are finally here and ready to be installed. Doug's 67 Mustang GT350 is getting prepped and ready for the great race. Sam installs the turbo manifolds and turbo on his LS Swap Toyota Supra. And Teddy's 92 Camaro gets a new electronic fuel injection system. Sam is on site at Low Car Performance to help Kevin and Travis install the new front axles in Kevin's Jeep. They've been waiting patiently for the Curry axles to finally arrive.
Well, as you can tell, we got a whole different scenery for you this time because we finally got the Curry axles that Kevin's been waiting so long for.
Yeah, it's been a feat to get the axles for this thing. I'm really excited to finally go four-wheel, and I'm out of excuses.
Yeah, but it's going to be well worth it, you know?
Yeah, these are
And they knocked it out the last minute for us. Very nice job they did.
They did. They came to the rescue, got us what we needed. They developed a set of axles specifically for the 392, meaning all-wheel drive, so they've got RCV front shafts, so we don't have to worry about any issues.
All right, well, let's get started. We're going to do the front first, and then we're going to knock out the rear next week. So the reason why Kevin and Travis are removing the hub adapter along with the rotor is because we're going to be removing the ABS sensor from the hub, letting it hang because we're going to transfer it onto the new Curry axle.
We used a transmission jack to take the factory one out, just mostly because we weren't thinking about the fact that we have a forklift, which made life a lot easier, and we'll use that on the rear just because it's a lot faster. But obviously when we put this axle in, we used a forklift. Not everybody has one. You could do this in your driveway just as easily. Probably what I would do if it were me is leave the tires and wheels on there, jack the car up, and be able to roll that axle out. If you don't have jack stands high enough, you can still do it, and just be careful. Always use the tools that are at your disposal, but remember that you can always find a way.
We are finalizing the installation of the axle by installing our upper control arms, lower control arms, keeping all the hardware loose until this axle is fully up in the air. We're compressing the suspension, and we'll tighten those things down. We've got our brake lines back in what looks like a factory bracket onto this Curry axle. That's pretty cool. I'm right now putting the ABS line that we took out of the old hub and putting it into the new one.
What Sam's doing is actually tidying up our ABS lines and brake lines. That's the most critical thing you can look for. They actually include little clips to keep the ABS line off of the brake rotor, but through the rest of this, we're just zip tying it up to the brake line and making sure everything's gonna clear. Check your steering, check once you put wheels and tires on, make sure those clear, make sure any of the suspension net components don't hit or pinch, including the arms. So cycle the suspension as much as you can and just be cognizant that those wires are very delicate. And if you lose those, you could have problems. So safety first, and just take your time and secure everything. To finish off this axle, we need to lube it. So Curry actually recommends, they have their own oil, I didn't even know that, but they recommend 3 quarts in here. Obviously they got a dipstick so we can keep an eye on it. They have a 4x4 performance gear oil specific for the Dana 44, 60, 70, and 80s.
Yep, yep. 75, 140.
Yep. Same front and rear. You know, when we did the gears in the old axles, they were different, but they just recommend the same front and rear.
I like the fact that they put the drain right there on top where you can easily fill it.
Yes, especially with this big, tall lift.
You guys got to pay attention to what gear lube you need for the differential. Curry will supply you with that. And then just make sure you know what bushings are in your rear end, whether it's a Curry or whatever front end or rear end you guys are using, to know whether you need it completely compressed before you tighten those bushings, or like we have rotating bushings, you can tighten them like there's a urethane. Well, guys, it was a long wait, but that was totally worth it. It looks so awesome.
Yeah, to be fair, part of the wait had to do with a mix-up on the locker and stuff, or we would have had these in when we were down at your shop last time.
I'm impressed with the whole bolt-in deal. I mean, like, for you to have something so big, so custom, and fit right up into the Jeep like the way we did, 3-hour job, it's a no-brainer.
With other modifications. I mean, we've got coilovers on this thing and different sway bars, and it all worked out.
Yeah, no kidding. This is awesome. Next week, we're gonna knock out the rear.
Welcome back to Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. Doug's classic 67 Mustang GT350 is in the garage to get a full inspection. He's the second owner of this special car, but it's been in his possession for over 50 years now. The guys plan to put in a different transmission and a new set of tires so the Mustang can run in the Great Race.
All right, we got another one of Doug's Fords. This one's a real special one. He's got a lot of cool Mustangs, but I think this one tops it all, right?
Yeah, Sam, this really does. You know, this coming year, we're going to get an opportunity to do the Great Race. This 67 Shelby GT350, I purchased in 1973. I paid $1,100 for this car.
That's crazy.
My monthly payments back then were $50 a month, and I wasn't sure how I was going to make it. $50 a month is a lot of money when you're not making any money. And I bought it right before I went into the Army. When I bought it, it was baby blue. And when I asked the owner if it had been repainted, he said, "Oh, no, this is the original color." Well, it wasn't. This is actually the original color, deep forest green. This is back in the time of American graffiti, street racing and everything. I souped it up, did a tremendous amount of street racing, had so much fun in this car, but I told myself, because it was one of 1,167 GT350s that were produced, I wasn't going to sell it.
Your dad get upset that you bought it?
Yeah, he did. My father was really upset. He told me I was crazy. He didn't think I could make the payments, and years later, he said, "You know, Doug, I was absolutely wrong, because the value of this car today is astronomical." Did some racing with this one at Hallett, did some road course, did some autocrossing with it, terrorized the streets with it. I was fortunate I never wound up in jail. Back then, they were a lot more lenient than they are today. And I told myself I would restore the car, and I took every nut and bolt off this car, had it all sandblasted, and I have somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 hours in restoring the car.
Yourself?
Myself, yeah. The only thing I didn't do the paint. When it went into the paint shop, a friend of mine finished the body and the paint. We had a little bit of work. I've owned this car over 50 years. Like I said, the stories that I can tell, the stuff that we've done, and then the restoration on this. My wife always gave me a hard time because she said this was my 30-year restoration project. And when I put the car back together, I couldn't put it the way the factory did it. Just in these front pieces, putting them on, taking them off, putting them on, taking them off. I'd have 40 hours, same thing in the back. Each wheel I hand did. Hours and hours and hours. I'd go on out in my shop, turn the music up, and I would restore the car. It was a labor of love.
There has not been an all-original Shelby GT350 at the Great Race.
Yeah, not a 67.
Yeah.
There is, I think there's a 65 GTH or a 68 GTH.
The Hertz?
The Hertz model, yeah. But this will be the first 67 from what we understand. I can never leave anything 100% original. It's got a set of tri-Y headers onto it, which was period correct for the car. When I used to race this thing, I had other mods. There's other mods inside the motor. I put 351 heads, poured it, and then I used Chevy valves, big 202 valves, 194 202s. That's really what made the 289s really come alive. They tell me it was worth about 70 horsepower, change the intake. So this car was running right around 400 horsepower for a car that weighed 2,700 pounds or less. What a labor of love. Everything from redoing the steering wheels to the rims to doing the interiors, the seats, you name it.
If you really look at the detail on it, you can see where they've cut corners and things just aren't lined up right. You did a really, really good job on this. The interior looks flawless.
I had an absolute blast in doing this. I've done other cars, but this to me is my crown jewel.
That's cool. Well, next week we're gonna get this thing ready because next year we're gonna be doing the Great Race. We're gonna change the fluids. We're gonna look at the brakes. We're gonna adjust the rear brakes, and it's got front disc, so that's good news. And then we'll tackle the transmission after that.
That sounds wonderful.
Let's do it.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So Joe, if you were to purchase a brand new vehicle, the best one you want to use is Boss Wax. And I see that you have a nationwide lifetime transferable warranty, but not only that, you report every job you do to Carfax, so it's got a permanent record.
Basically, it is a proactive permanent record, so it is a good thing to have. Now, is it the best finish? It's a personal preference. Boss Wax, I would say, is probably 95% of the brand new vehicles that come into us, because you need to have a completely new rust-free surface, would opt into the Boss Wax. And then we apply oil to the body cavities, which is critical. It's more important than the surface, because you can touch up a surface, you can see it. You don't see the interior of a frame, and it's prone to hold moisture, it's unfinished. So our oil is going to go in, creep, migrate, go in the spot welds, the seams, and then we're going to babysit the truck. You come in every 2 years, we inspect it, breaches in the surface, we touch it up, and then we re-oil the body cavities. And so it is a great way to extend the life of the vehicle 10, 15 years.
So if you guys purchase a brand new vehicle, you want to protect that vehicle and keep its value as long as you can, you want to definitely look at NHOU's Boss Wax.
Welcome back to more Sam's Garage, presented by NHOU. Sam installs the turbo and manifolds on the LS engine in his Toyota Supra drag car. There's still quite a bit of work ahead, but Sam is one step closer to getting this car back out on the track.
All right, so finally, I am at the stage with my Supra where I'm going to be doing the turbo kit. Went to Summit Racing, got the hooker kit for the LS engine. I'm going to put the turbo right up front. I was going to put it here, but then the hood won't close. So I'm going to put it right in front of the engine using stage 8 fasteners because I want everything to stay in place, no gaskets to be blown, and no hardware to come loose. Let's get started. There's 2 spots on the manifold where the retainer is too short to grab either runner. So it's just going to free float in the air. Instead of using a standard one like this, they give you a bent one like that. That way you can put that tab on the bottom side of the manifold, and it's going to grab the manifold and it's going to keep that hardware tight. What I love about stage 8 locking fasteners, especially in a situation like a turbo. If you guys have done turbo kits, then you know that you got a 10mm bolt. Usually it's going to have a 17mm head, but the heads are big, and so it gets in the way. Stage 8, 7/16 11mm head, plenty of room around it to be able to tighten your fastener. And they give you an Allen head in the middle. And if you have a ball socket, you can get it from up here. You can very easily tighten this turbo onto its flange with no worries. Because the last thing you want to come loose, that gasket get compromised and you've lost your boost. Anywhere that there is a leak before the turbine, you're going to lose boost. So that's why the Stage 8 locking fasteners is the perfect candidate when it comes to a turbocharged application. Before I installed the turbo, I made this little pipe to go from the manifold to the turbo's flange. And so I'm going to put my wastegate right there. But you see I have a gap, and if I put this guy in too deep, my V-band will no longer fit. Only that much protrudes out of the V-band. So I'm going to make the hole smaller than the flange so that I have material to weld onto. And as long as the inside diameter has a hole and get air out, it should work just fine. So this is the up pipe. So the turbo is going to be sitting over here. So you want to make sure that anytime you have a weld, you want to make sure there's no metal, like what you see there, some rod got in there. If you don't clean that up, it's going to go through the turbo and destroy the turbine blade. And you don't want that. The wastegate, all of them have a firing ring. It goes right there. Make sure you guys put that in, or the wastegate's going to just be like it's wide open. And it is spring loaded. The spring in here is pushing down on this. So you are going to have to put this in on this, press down, and tighten your V-band clamp. All right, so the turbo is installed. I've got clearance all the way around it. I'm going to sneak a 3-inch down pipe right here in front of the wastegate. That wastegate's dump tube is going to come out, and I'm going to incorporate that into the downpipe as well, sneak it underneath the right side manifold. The air intake's going to go over there to the driver's side, or in this case, passenger side, and I'll have plenty of room for a cold air 4-inch pipe right through there. Intercooler pipe is going to go from the bottom of the turbo to that side, which is the passenger side. It's going to come out of here, the driver's side, go up through this hole underneath the headlight, come up here, and go right to the throttle body. Couple more steps ahead. This thing still has a long way to go before it runs. I got to completely do the exhaust system from the turbo. I got to run oil and coolant to the turbo. So once it's done though, it won't make nearly the horsepower that it did with the 2JZ, but it's going to be a lot more fun, a lot more streetable, and I'm going to actually be able to drive it and shift gears again. That's pretty cool. So if you guys want to see this setup and install it for yourself using Stage 8 locking fasteners and all the Hooker turbo components, go to Summit Racing. They've got everything you need and they have it in stock.
Welcome back to Sam's Garage, presented by NHOU. Sam's now ready to get started on the electronic fuel injection system on Teddy's 92 Camaro RS. He's gone ahead and removed the factory wiring to make room for the new harness that came with the 383 engine. In addition, Sam will be installing a new fuel pump and pressure regulator to make sure the engine gets plenty of fuel.
Last week we installed the Deluxe 383 small block from Ed Morse, and this week we're going to be installing the EFI and the fuel system. I've already terminated all the fuel injection from the main harness underneath the engine bay for the old fuel injection, and I've already connected all my sending units for the instrument cluster inside the car, transferring all those sensors last week. So this week we're going to install the harness, power and ground to the computer, install the new fuel system, and we should be ready to crank this car. This is a 383 Deluxe crate turnkey engine from GM, so it comes with its own EFI. And check out how small that computer is, very nice. The transmission is mechanical to 700 on this, so it's gonna be just fine without one. So we have a sub harness here for the fuel injectors. We have a little sub harness here for the distributor, idle air control valve, and the coil pack. Those are gonna plug into this big main harness that's going to plug into the computer, the battery, and 2 sub harnesses. It comes with the relays and the fuses. So what I'm going to do on this is put the computer on the passenger side footwell because the battery is right there, so I can shorten my power and ground. Very important to hook up the power and ground straight to the battery so you have a good clean connection. And in the signal wire, which is this pink one, you want to make sure you have a good live 12-volt source from the key under cranking. Very important, under cranking. You don't want to go to the coil positive wire because it may not be a good clean signal. In this kit comes with everything. Comes with a starter, comes with everything. And we even comes with the bungs and the fittings you need for your heater. But our heater, OEM, we kept it factory so that it works factory, so we just needed the one fitting on the water pump, so we should be good there. The PCV valve in the instructions just shows to be placed on the driver's side valve cover going to the throttle body, but in my case it was ugly, so I put it on the passenger side. That way it's a little more discreet and you can see the nice chrome breather on the driver's side. Shorten the wire for my ECT sensor. What I recommend you guys is taking the regular butt connector you have and pushing out the center sleeve because the butt connector gets to become too big and bulky to hide underneath the loom or tape. So you take it and take the center out, punch it out, use the center, crib your wires in place, and take a little heat shrink on the outside, tape it up, and you have a much cleaner look. When it comes to GMs, you guys know those side posts are a real bear, and you have to really cut the outside rubber grommets to get power wires in there. So I went off the power wire exactly to the junction to where the junction meets where power comes in from the battery, and my positive is right there. The ground is at the battery ground where the body is. I've got fuel feed and return. This is a 92 system. Now, you can't tell which one is which, but if you look at the hard line, you can tell that the feed line is bigger than the return line. So make sure that you guys use the correct lines when going to your aftermarket fuel pressure regulator, because the old regulator used to be on the throttle body injection. I have to use an aftermarket regulator giving the fuel system 58 PSI. And then I'm going to take a hose from the regulator to the fuel rail, and we should be good to go. I'm gonna do a fuel pump inside the fuel tank because the one inside is only good for 150 horsepower. We need at least 215 liters per hour. So I got a 255 coming from Summit Racing. We're gonna install that and we should be good to go. Everything for the fuel injection is completely installed. The fuel system is in place. I moved the coil over from the intake manifold because it's a little cluttered over there. I put it right here on the frame rail, extended the wires for that. We're ready to go. In the kit, GM gives you an air intake temp sensor to go on the underside of the air cleaner, a timing lockout connector to go on this, because when you want to set up your base ignition timing at 12 degrees, you have to have that in there to tell the computer to lock it in at 12 degrees. So when you set your distributor, you're good to go. Next, we're going to be putting in the rear end or the Performa build transmission, whichever comes first. It's a surprise to both of us.
Be sure to check out Sam's Garage on these other media platforms. Send us questions and feedback to info@samsgaragetv.com. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Sam's Garage. The new heavy-duty Curry front axle is now installed in Kevin's Jeep. He's the second owner of this special car, but it's been in his possession for over 50 years now. The turbo is now installed on Sam's MK3 Supra drag car. And Teddy's 383 swapped Camaro now has the fuel system ready to go.